Welcome to the training video for the ADM Wrecking Ball Carnival ride. In this video, we will show you how to set up, operate, and tear down a wrecking ball unit. When you first get your ride, you will notice that the power cord comes with bare pigtails like shown here. It is recommended to use 50 amp service only to power the ride. You can use many different types of 50 amp plugs. Shown here is a 50 amp twist lock plug, which is commonly used on large tow-behind generators. At any point before turning on the circuit breakers, you can connect power to the ride. After positioning the ride on a flat or semi-flat surface, disconnect the ride from the truck. First, drop the jack foot on both of the stabilizer jacks down as far as you can and lock it in the closest hole to the ground. Crank both of the front stabilizer jacks to lift the ride off the truck. This is typically better done with one person on each jack. After disconnecting the truck, remove the fencing from the fence rack on the back or tail of the ride trailer. You will need to access the compartment below the fencing rack to fully set up the attraction. Once the front is lifted off the truck hitch and fencing is removed, move to the back and repeat the same steps for the stabilizer jacks. The tires should be just off the ground so that the weight is placed on the stabilizer jacks and then eventually the outrigger legs. Use a level to make sure that the ride is level both front to back and side to side. Once the ride is level, you'll need to put the outrigger legs down. To release the outrigger legs, pull the R pin from the clevis pin and pull the clevis pin out. Then, carefully lower the outrigger legs and put the clevis pin back in the storage position hole on the frame of the ride. It is recommended to put a block of wood down underneath the sand shoe, whether the ride is being used on a hard or soft surface. Repeat this for the 3 remaining outrigger legs. After all of the outrigger legs are down, you will need to install the turnbuckle rods to the outrigger leg and the frame. These are most commonly stored in the compartment on the back of the ride. To access this compartment, remove the 2 nuts and bolts from the bottom, then the 2 R pins from the top. Once the back cover is off, remove the turnbuckle rods and place one by each outrigger leg. Attach one side of the turnbuckle rod to the frame of the ride and the other to the outrigger leg. You will most likely need to adjust the turnbuckle every time. Make sure that each end of the rod is held still and only turn the center oval part of the turnbuckle to adjust the overall length. Once you have the right length, attach the turnbuckle rod to the other side. Once connected on both sides, tighten the turnbuckle to be hand tight. Repeat this step for the 3 other outrigger legs. After a quick inspection of the motor compartment, you can reinstall the cover. Ensure that the R pins are replaced and the nuts and bolts at the bottom are tightened. Now, slightly lower all 4 leveling jacks so that the weight of the entire ride is shared between the stabilizing jacks and the outrigger legs. The weight should be distributed about 50-50, with 50% of the weight on the outrigger legs and 50% on the stabilizing jacks. Some models of the wrecking ball have a folded marquee that has to be folded up for the operation of the ride. Carefully climb up and fold the sign by removing the transportation brackets and pushing the sign up. Secure in the upright position using the pins. Next, you'll need to remove the tongue hitch. First, disconnect the breakaway control cable and then remove the trailer wiring altogether from the tongue. For this particular ride, the electrical cable is wrapped around the tongue and secured with a pin on the hitch tongue handle to hold it in place. Other methods to hold the cable on the hitch tongue are Velcro straps or zip ties. Once the electrical is removed and coiled underneath the trailer, crawl underneath the trailer and loosen the bolt that secures the tongue. Once the bolt is loosened, remove the clevis pin. Using 2 people, slide the tongue out from the sleeve. Once the tongue is removed, you will then be able to flip down the step. Remove the transport rod that connects the step to the frame of the ride and then flip the step down. Be very careful to ensure that the cable is not caught in between the step and the frame of the ride. The final step in setting up the ride is to remove the transport bars that hold the rotating basket in place during transport. One transport bar is rigid and the other is a turnbuckle. Start with a turnbuckle transport rod by loosening the turnbuckle, pulling the pin, and removing the rod. Then go to the rigid transport bar on the other side. Remove the pin and pull the transport bar out completely. To turn power onto the ride, Open up the electrical box at the front of the ride using a flathead screwdriver or something similar. Turn on each circuit breaker one at a time and then lock up the box. To start the motor, you first need to release the emergency stop button. Do this by twisting the button in the direction of the arrows and then allowing the button to pop up. Next, press the green button on the motor control switch. Then release the load actuator by pressing the green button on the brake control switch. To spin the basket, slowly move the lever on the variable speed flow control to the right. To stop the basket from spinning, slowly move the lever to the left. To swing the pendulum, push the flow control lever to the right to make the pendulum swing to the right, and then push it to the left to make the pendulum go to the left. When the ride reaches the highest point before going the other direction, move the flow control lever to the other side. Repeat this for the duration of the ride. It takes a little practice to get the timing down right, but after a few ride cycles, you should have it down. On some models, there is a limit switch attached to the frame, and the trigger is attached to the pendulum spindle. Once the ride reaches a certain height, the limit switch will be triggered and the motor will shut off. When this happens, simply turn the motor back on to continue operation. To prevent the limit switch from being hit, simply stop moving the flow control lever for a couple swings and then start moving it again. You can decide to operate this attraction in many different patterns since the ride is manually controlled. This operator starts by swinging the pendulum first, then once it reaches about half of its swing height, the operator starts the spin, but only does about 50% speed on the spin of the basket. Once the ride operator decides that the ride is over, he will stop moving the flow control lever and then slowly move the lever on the variable speed flow control to the left to slow the spin of the basket, with the end goal of the basket opening matching up with the step so riders can exit. Once the ride has stopped moving and the basket is positioned correctly, press the red button to put the load actuator up and in the locked position. When it's time to tear down the ride, the first thing you must do is lower the load actuator and spin the basket so the opening of the basket is squared up with the step. Once lined up, turn off the motor and press the emergency stop button. Next, go under the basket and make sure that the brackets line up for the turnbuckles. Once the brackets are aligned, mount the rigid transport bar on the basket and then on the ride frame. Go to the other side and install the turnbuckle rod and then tighten the turnbuckle. Only after the two transport rods are installed and tightened on the bottom of the basket, raise the load actuator to apply medium pressure for transport. Next, open the electrical box and turn off all the circuit breakers one by one. When finished, secure the electrical box shut. Next, fold the step up and secure it to the frame of the ride with a transport bar. Then with two people, slide the hitch into the ride frame's sleeve. Insert the clevis pin and then tighten the bolt under the ride so it is snug. Do not wrench on this bolt or it could strip and not unscrew. Reinstall the wiring for the trailer electric, making sure to connect the breakaway control cable. Next, fold down the marquee sign if your model has the folding marquee. This must be stowed in the folded position for transport or the ride will be overall too tall to legally drive the ride down the road. Now, lift the entire ride up by lowering the stabilizer jacks to release the pressure from the Outrigger legs. Do this to all 4 stabilizer jacks. Once the tension has been released from the Outrigger legs, you can then remove all 4 turnbuckle rods that attach the Outrigger legs to the frame and pivot all of the Outrigger legs back to the upright transport position. Secure using the clevis pins. Once all turnbuckle rods have been removed, stow them for transport in the back storage compartment. Make sure to secure the door to the compartment for transport by tightening down the bolts at the bottom. Next, raise the back stabilizer jacks and slide the jack foot all of the way up, ensuring the pin locks it in place. At this point, or at any point after turning off the circuit breakers, you can disconnect power. Finally, put the fencing back on the rack, hook the ride up to the truck, and raise the front stabilizer jacks and jack feet. Thanks for watching this training video on the ADM Wrecking Ball ride.